Welcome to the Octavius Gould Experience, and I am your host, Octavius Gould. Today, I have the pleasure of having as a guest Greg Kimbrough. Greg is the National Director of Leadership Development at the Boys and Girls Club of America. And I am truly excited to have you on, Greg, because as you know, I've done some work with you all. I am very fond of the professionals at your organization across the world, and more importantly, the mission that you all are so committed to. So welcome to the podcast episode, Greg.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great to see you and be on here with you.
Well, let's get right into it.
All right.
Your background is truly impressive. So when I was doing my due diligence, trying to think of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, I had to first start back with how we met in Atlanta
Yeah.
at your headquarters, all of the great people who were there at that particular time, and just wanted to really thank you because for me, being a former athlete and giving back to youth is really something that I'm passionate about. And that's what you all do every day. And I'm quite sure you must love being able to be in a business where you can impact people at such a young age.
Oh man, it is the why, right? I mean, I think if it, I hope everyone has their why in their work and in their world. But for me, it's an easy why, and it's one that I may not have realized early, but it was something that was ingrained in me at a young age, and it is it's an it, when those days are hard and the work is difficult and you sometimes are banging your head against the wall. I at least feel confident and comfortable every night I put my head on a pillow that the work we're doing is literally changing and saving lives for young people across America.
Absolutely, absolutely. Greg, and you've been with the Boys and Girls Clubs for over 20 years. So start with taking us back to 2002. Let me know what drew you to the Boys and Girls Clubs and what did leadership mean to you at that stage of your career, which I know is much different than it is today.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It actually starts a little before 2002.
Okay.
My wife and I were living in Chicago. Just married in 2000. I had just gotten my first job out of college in advertising, um, and I honestly hated it. I'm going to be, advertising was not what they showed on TV. It wasn't it,
Mhm.
and the work wasn't hard. It just wasn't fulfilling, I guess is what I would
Okay.
say. And so I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I had an entrepreneurial spirit. I believe I have that. And so I actually jumped on with a small cabinet making firm in Chicago as a project manager. I have a lot of family members in woodworking, and so I'd always had an interest in it, but I really love the entrepreneurial aspect of small business. And so I did that, and I loved it. It was a blast. But my wife got offered a job in Naples, Florida, and it was December of 2001. So you can imagine the difference in December in Chicago and the difference in December in Naples. And so it was a pretty easy decision for a young couple without kids
Mhm.
to just say, "Hey, let's go explore the world." And so went down to Naples, and honestly, my first moment there was, okay, I'm going to start my own business.
Mhm.
I'm going to, really see what I can do with this idea of woodworking and building a business from scratch. But at the time, we just weren't sure how long we were going to be in Naples, Florida. We were there. We were trying to figure things out. And this is back in the day when newspapers still came to your front porch, right? And I remember, looking in the newspaper, I was like, okay, until I figure this whole business thing out, uh, let me do something fun. And that's when I saw in the paper a job for a program specialist at the local Boys and Girls Clubs. And as somebody, I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, out in the county,
Mhm.
and I had a YMCA, but I didn't have a Boys and Girls Club, so I
Okay.
didn't really know much about Boys and Girls Clubs. But the position seemed intriguing, so I was like, why not? I'll do this until I get a quote real job, right? And started there teaching financial literacy and science programs. And man, uh, it got a hold of me quick. And so I can never tell anybody like I had this like moment of I need to go work there. It
Right.
truly was I want to go have fun. I was in my 20s. I want to have some fun. But then once I was there, all of a sudden the it was still fun, but there was something deeper that I never could put a finger on early in my career. But that's kind of how I got launched into sort of this idea of boys and girls clubs.
I love the story, although you did tell your age, which is also telling mine,
Yes, yes,
with the story about the newspaper, because that's how I found my first job at MCI Telecommunications in 1993. Looking through
yes.
the newspaper, there are many listeners who probably have no idea what we're laughing about right now, Greg.
No, no. What are you talking about? Yes, yes. That was, and look, I worked for an ad agency who started monsters.com, which was the first like
Wow.
job portal, right? So, but I still loved opening that paper and being able to actually like physically read things.
Greg, was there a moment early in your career when you realized that this work at the Boys and Girls Club is more than a job? It was actually your calling.
Yeah, so I think about this a lot, and over the years I've been asked like, when did you figure it out? I don't know if there was a single moment, because when I look back on it, what I know is throughout my career, especially early in the career, I was presented opportunities to either go start a business, right? Or somebody would share a position or that they thought I'd be really good at, or make me an offer to come to somewhere else. And at the time, I don't know why I said no, because
Mhm.
many of those opportunities would have created better financial security for me and my family, would
Right.
have been career moves, right? And but I could never get excited about them. And at the time I didn't know why. I was more excited about going to the club every day and getting to do the work I was doing in the various roles, right? It was like it just kept motivating me. And again, there were moments I had personal family members at times who were like, okay, you've done your service to the community. When are you going to go again, quote, get a real job? And it started bothering me. I was like, this is a real job and I'm having fun. I'm meeting lots of new people and I'm actually making an impact and I'm watching the impact happen,
Right.
right? Live. I'm literally watching change happen in young people. And that, man, so I would say those first 2 or 3 years really helped me solidify my why. But at the time, nothing was as intriguing as doing the work I was doing.
Yeah. You have to be passionate about what you do. And
Yeah.
when you can do something day in and day out that you truly love, that's also impactful at the same time. It's a win-win, right?
Absolutely.
You transition from program oversight into a athletic director role and then senior director of resources development. How did those moves stretch you as a leader as you were still pretty young and still learning the ropes as it relates to leadership competencies and skills that would elevate people within the organization?
Yeah. So I often think about this that first role as a program leader and director really was more focused on what I was doing, right? It was all
Mhm.
about the work I could do and achieve. And oftentimes, the resources or tools in order to do the work were just given to me, and it was about
Mhm.
me implementing those tools and resources. And I think I did a really good job at that. What I often tell people is I was blessed to have a CEO at the time in that organization. Her name's Mary Boyce Johnson, and she was so good at identifying potential. And I often look back, and so that first role was, again, it's about me. It's like leading through self.
Right.
But then as I got to move into the athletic director role, and it was a new role. We had just built an athletic and aquatic center. I was tasked with creating team sports programs in the world of athletics that our kids and youth in that community had not had access to. And so it really fed into that entrepreneurial spirit that I loved. So it was really allowing me to flex into a skill I thought I had at the time. But then it was stretching me in a space of, hey, while we're giving you some of these resources like the gym and the pool and all of these things, you're going to have to go out. If you want to do over and above what we're giving you, you're going to have to go out and find those resources, and you're going to have to partner with others. And so it pushed me into a space of not just leading through self, but now connecting others into something bigger, right? So now I had to really find ways to articulate what we were trying to achieve in the world of athletics for our youth to our partners, and ultimately, in some cases, go out and find the resources, because I did not want to put that on our youth and our families. I felt like that was my obligation to go and get those resources, and so that stretched me into, can you articulate what you're trying to achieve and get people excited about what you and the organization are doing? And then that's, I believe, what set the stage for me in resource development was, and again, I often tell people, my CEO at the time, you look back and you go, oh, that's what they were doing. And I'm a big believer that you have to control your destiny and you have to develop yourself. But it really helps when you have somebody in your corner and somebody that recognizes capabilities that you may not see in yourself. And she was really good at doing that, and then giving me tasks and assignments along the way that may not have related directly to my current role. But ultimately, again, I look back and go, oh, she was providing stretch opportunities to really help build that capability to create the runway for me to grow, and ultimately then sit down with me and go, this is what I want you to do next. And so resource development stretched me really hard into that space of connecting people to an idea. So, in a business, in a for-profit business, I'm going to a potential client and I'm showing them the benefit they will get from giving me money. They're going to oftentimes get a product or service from it that they benefit from. In our world of Boys and Girls Clubs, many of the people that we're interacting with to invest aren't in need of the services that we provide. And so we're having to build this connection to an idea that if you invest in this, you are literally changing the shape of this community that you live in for the better. And so that was probably the biggest stretch for me, is really to get into that space of connecting you to something bigger than you, right?
Exactly. And when I had the great opportunity to be involved in your Leadership Next program, doing some due diligence to prepare for that session, I learned about something that was ultimately truly important. And you just kind of touched on it, fundraising, right?
Yes.
Fundraising requires a tremendous amount of influence, trust, and vision. What did that experience teach you about leadership, Greg, beyond operations?
Yeah, so especially in the world, I would say, of trust and vision, right? I
Mhm.
never felt like I was trying to influence somebody to do something. I felt like I had a responsibility to really help them see their role in something bigger than in either of us in the conversation, right? And so for me, I had to go beyond just what we do on a day-to-day basis at the organization, right? I had to really understand and listen. So it pushed me into a space from a leadership perspective of asking a lot of questions
Right.
and not just simply sharing everything, right? And so, um, you know, I don't know many people that could sit there and find a reason why Boys and Girls Clubs is not helpful. right? So it's less about telling them all the good. They know it's a benefit to the community, but it was really more about me spending time with individuals and businesses and partners, understanding their motivations, and then finding the connections and the connectivity to how they want to impact the community and how we can help them do that through the mission and vision of Boys and Girls Clubs. And so, you know, you can't it, if you don't believe. Sorry, here's how I would say it. If you don't, it's easy to believe in the mission. It's more complicated to understand the nuance and impact of it, and then be willing to not try and sell it, but really understand and help others understand the collective impact it has so that they can see where they fit in the vision, right? And I think both individuals and groups can find their purpose in it, right? And to me, I often go back to this idea that most people understand something they've experienced. So
Right.
and are willing to connect and give to it, right? So your college alma mater, right? Your high school alma mater, like you experienced that. So you know what it did for you and you want to give back to it, or a hospital where you or your family member were cared for. Those are tangible and easy. In this world, um, the majority of individuals you're often interacting with in a fundraising or resource development space may not have needed a Boys and Girls Club, experienced a Boys and Girls Clubs, and in some cases may not even know that their community needs a Boys and Girls Club. So
Right.
it's to me, it's a lot of just listening, asking lots of questions, and then connecting them into the idea.
Yeah. I normally ask this question at the end, but I know some of these roles that you just communicated and articulated about were really challenging. When you look back, what role before your current one challenged you the most and why?
Ooh, probably when I became a CEO of a local
Mhm.
Boys and Girls Club. So after 6 years in Naples, Florida, uh, I had learned so much, and I really wanted to take what I had learned, and then again, I'd always had this idea of quote owning a business, right? Well, hey, there's an opportunity to, in a way, own a business, right? And so I had the opportunity to go out to northern Colorado and be the CEO of a local organization. It was the most challenging role I believe I've ever experienced. It grew me the most. Um, the why is, one, in my previous roles, although I had small teams that reported to me, this was now taking the reins of a organization that had, at the time, 12 full-time employees, about 40 to 50 part-time employees. I now had a board of directors, and in the nonprofit world, they're volunteers, they're not paid, right?
Right.
And so, one other factor in that organization is they had some challenges in the previous years before I arrived, and I talk about this idea of, as a leader, as a young leader, I had this mindset that as long as you did your job and you did it really well, you'd be taken care of and opportunities would be presented to you. And the other piece was the company owed you nothing more than the paycheck that you earned through good work.
Right.
And so I didn't feel like in my early career I had a responsibility to help shape culture. If I did, I always told people like, if you don't like where you work, you can leave. Like it's not up to them to create an environment that's benefiting you. That was my early mindset. So take that mindset and try and become a CEO of an organization of, you know, you know, 50 plus employees and a board of, at that time, I think we had 12, 15 board members. The idea of just me doing really good work wasn't enough. it wasn't going to change the the dynamics of the organization, and it wasn't going to help us get better. And so lots of fails in those first few months to that first year of trying to take that old leadership mindset
Right.
and almost like an individuality mindset of just I'm going to take care of me to going and realizing if it's not about me, it's about we, right? It's about us, and both us as a board, but us as a staff, and then us as a community, and really having to kind of take ego out of it and realize that it's not just about me coming in early and leaving late. That is a modeled behavior,
Right.
um, but it's not always the right behavior, right? It's necessary at times, and so it really the biggest challenge for me was moving out of that mindset to again being willing to do what I was doing well in resource development, and that was ask a lot of questions, but not just of donors, of
Right.
my board, of my staff, helping get them connected into our why, and then connecting their purpose in it and helping them see that they can realize their aspirations through our work together. And that again, I tell people I didn't have a lot of mentors at the time. Luckily, there were some around that area that took me under their wing,
Mhm.
and I had some really good community leaders in that area that really helped shape me as a leader and show me that it's not just about you working 12, 15-hour days. It's
Right.
about how are you shaping the culture of this organization, and that was my big shift, but it was also our biggest challenge, my biggest challenge.
And talking about challenges, Greg, when I was perusing your LinkedIn and saw that move into the CEO spot in Weld County,
Mm-hmm.
I thought about the fact that it was in 2008. There was a downturn of the economy. Economic
Mm-hmm.
conditions and the level of uncertainty was tremendous. How did you pivot into that role, get
Mm-hmm.
acclimated during a time of uncertainty?
Yeah, it absolutely was challenging, and given the localized challenges we were having organizationally, um, for me, it was about building trust again in the organization and within the community. So, um, you know, we had to get to a space where we could stop talking about the past and start talking about the future. And yeah, we were watching. I was watching other nonprofits, businesses starting to draw down or get smaller or tighten their belt, so to speak. We saw federal and state funding getting cut. We saw corporations cutting their localized investment in communities. Even foundations who typically, family foundations or corporate foundations that would give to local nonprofits, all of them are tied to the resources that they're bringing in. And if they're
Right.
not bringing in resources, they're shortening, their giving to others. But what I did believe at the time, and I still believe, is if you're willing to listen and hear what we're trying to do in this community, and one of the things that we were seeing is in that economic downturn, some of the families that may not have needed the services of boys and girls clubs at the time were now in need of
Right.
services for their children. And so what we were able to demonstrate to the community stakeholders and individuals, and we really had to push more into individual giving because the research showed that often in difficult economic times, your individual giving doesn't taper off as much as your corporate and your governmental funding, which again there's logic there. But what we had to do is we had to build trust, and we had to show them that look, there's even greater need for the services that we offer young people after school and during the summer than ever before. And ultimately, that shift and mindset change of you're actually investing in something that's going to help us come out of this, right?
Right.
Because you're helping us build the next level of leaders in our community that will ultimately build businesses and grow and be, you know, uh, impactful community citizens. And and I'm not going to say it was easy, right? It took time, but ultimately I don't think we weathered the storm. I think we were strategic in navigating the circumstances that were presented to us at the time.
Greg, many of us, whether you're a small business owner like myself, someone at a nonprofit, or even a big corporation, we covet that CEO title. So you get, we wear it like a badge of honor. We get the business cards right away. You move into this role of CEO. What surprised you the most about leading an organization at that level?
Yeah, I would say that change is harder than you think. Um, you know, change works really well when everybody's on board and all the systems and processes are in place to help move that change and transition forward. Coming into an environment where all those processes were not in place, all those systems, were maybe dysfunctional or not being used effectively, all of a sudden you realize as a leader, this is not going to happen overnight. It's not going to, there's this kind of old adage, right? Leaders accept change sooner. Well, duh, we're the ones that create it, right? So oftentimes, so I would say what surprised me most in that first year was how hard it is if you're trying to do it alone. And for me, I came from a high performing boys and girls club where we had won numerous awards. And I walked in saying, hey, if we just do this and we just do this, everything will be fine. And, on paper, those are good things. They worked,
Right.
in another location. But the challenge was they were just my ideas, right? And I wasn't doing a good job of connecting people into the change and the purpose of the change, right? And what I found was that as I started realizing this is not working, and again, I have numerous examples of failed change efforts in those first year as a CEO, both at the board level, at the community level, and at the staff level. Um, but once I was able to kind of get into the mindset of, okay, why don't we talk about what's needed and what we want to do, right?
Right.
Both at that board level, um, what do we want this organization to look like? As soon as I started using words like we and getting out of the ego of I'm the CEO, I'm supposed to cast the vision and shift into a mindset that I need to facilitate a dialogue, a generative dialogue where we start focusing less on the past problems. They're real and we got to address them, but spending more time. That was my biggest shift is how can we spend more time talking about where we're going?
Right.
We still got to talk about the past, but let's time bound that and limit it so that we can spend more time on moving forward. And as soon as I started asking the opinions of others, both at the staff level and community and board level, all of a sudden their energy level in ensuring that change happened was astronomically greater. And it ultimately allowed us to accelerate change at a pace that I couldn't even imagine. And again, it was for me about getting out of that sort of myopic, I'm the leader, I must make all the decisions, into, you know what? If we make decisions together, then we will all own getting to that result that we want to achieve. and you get that synergy that they talk about, right? So
Right.
that was probably the biggest surprise is, yeah, change is not easy. And if you don't plan for it and you don't think about how people transition through it, you're gonna bang your head against the wall, which I did a lot.
Hey, we've all been there, you know.
Yeah,
That's probably why I don't have any hair.
yeah, mine's getting thin because of that. Yeah.
Greg, what makes leadership in a mission-driven, great organization like the Boys and Girls Club uniquely challenging, but at the same time, uniquely rewarding?
That's a great question because I do think it is uniquely challenging as a leader of a nonprofit. You know, you're leading at multiple levels. And what I mean by that is, again, I said earlier, you have a board of directors, right?
Mhm.
They're a volunteer board. You know, they're not paid to be there. They're doing it because they believe in something bigger. And ultimately, they're your governing body. They actually are the governing body of the organization. So, in a sense, not even in a sense, literally, you work for them. And ultimately, the board chair is your supervisor, even though they've hired you to carry out the mission and vision of the organization. So that dynamic is unique in that you're having to lead, but follow, but be a peer with a group of community stakeholders, um, and they're looking to you because they believe in your expertise in the space of nonprofit, and specifically in my world, youth development. Um, but you're also having to connect them into and create shared goals and shared ideas and ultimately again a mindset of we need to do this work together. At the same time, you have a lot of community investors, right? Donors, both individuals, businesses, foundations, corporations, that um, you're a fiduciarily responsible person for their investment and in something, and they want to see that their investment is being utilized
Right.
effectively and efficiently, right? And so having to balance those environments again, I tell people we're not selling a product, right? I'm not able to say, you know, you're going to buy 500 units and I'm going to deliver those 500 units in 30 days. And if I don't, here's what's going to happen. In this case, you're saying, trust us with your resources. And we promise if you're willing to invest in us, there will be outcomes. They don't happen in 30 days, they happen over time. And so that is a challenging space. And then the third is, like with any leader, your staffing, right? Your employees. And oftentimes in the nonprofit space, you know, the compensation is not always equal to the private industry, right? Now we can have a whole separate dialogue on whether that's right or wrong. And I would say I feel like we should be compensating effectively for the work they're doing because it's and many nonprofits, it's you know, you can use the phrase God's work. It's bigger than it's not just God's work. It's a livelihood, and we should be compensating people for the work they're doing, just as if they were in a for-profit space. So I'll get off that soapbox, but those elements create a challenge, you know, for leadership and nonprofit. The unique reward, if you're willing to sit in this mission work long enough, you actually see it, right? You see the tangible change in a human life. And I'll manage my emotions in it because I can get very passionate about it. But you know, over the years, 20, almost 24 years now, I can, I have young people that are now grown adults, living lives, having families, um, you know, being contributors in their communities. And you sit there and you know the circumstances in which many of them came from,
Right.
and you look at the grit and the resilience and the perseverance that they've overcome to be successful, and you're just like, there it is. I mean, that's the unique thing. You actually get to see individual lives change, but more than individuals, you see cycles breaking, You see communities growing, right? You see, you know, literally thousands upon thousands of of people being reshaped and developed for something greater, right? And so that to me is the unique reward in this space that I call Boys and Girls Clubs.
Greg, you may bring a tear to my eye as well. And it forced me to reflect on a moment that really made me almost break down. I was watching the NFL draft a few years ago, and there was a gentleman who got drafted in the first round. So he was a top 10 pick, which means he's a multi-millionaire.
Mm-hmm.
He thanked his mother, his teammates, and the Boys and Girls Club.
Oh, there it is, right there. You're gonna get me, man. That is,
Yes.
those are the moments that you go, okay, it's bigger than the business, right?
Right.
And it is a business. We are a business. People often say, well, you're a nonprofit. That's just a tax status.
Right.
We are a business. We need to operate like a business. We need to innovate. We
Mhm.
need to grow. We need to serve more young people.
Mhm.
And ultimately, in doing those things, we're going to hear more and more of those stories, right? And for
Exactly.
any youth development organization out there, it's that's what our purpose and that's what we should be striving for every day is that
Mhm.
those stories get louder and louder because it is meaningful. And as you said, it not only made a difference for him, it's going to make a difference for future generations, what he was able to achieve athletically, right? And so, yeah, that's such a great story.
Now, as National Director of Leadership Development, what is your core philosophy on developing leaders across the organization?
Mm. So this is mine, and it kind of is what keeps me doing this work. And it's what am I doing every day to help others be successful in their role? And so I, I feel like as a leader, you know, I have to look at myself in the mirror every night and in reflection every week. And I have to be able to ask the question of myself, what were the actions I did this week that helped someone else? Not just young people, yes, but someone else that I either work with or for or alongside be more successful and reach their potential. When I work directly with young people, my focus was on them, right, and them being more successful. Once I started becoming a leader of adults, I had to recognize, and it took me time, but I had to realize, and I think I didn't understand this philosophy probably until about 10, 12 years ago. And it's what really drove me into leadership development even deeper was we have a responsibility to the people that we lead. And yes, there's an aspect about sharing a vision and casting a vision. But if we're not developing them to be more successful than we are, then what are we doing? Well,
Right.
why are we even doing this? Our purpose, if I can create a great workplace where people thrive and they feel like their leader cares about their future, that will cascade to that next level of leader. And that will ultimately cascade and create great experience for young people because people want to be at work, right? And if you want to be at work because you know that the organization cares about you and the leadership in the organization wants you to reach the highest heights that you want to go to and sometimes stretch you beyond, then man, it makes the work so much easier and so much more fun. And so, work is hard, and we all know it. There are days, and there have been days that I have to look myself in the mirror and say I didn't do that today. I didn't remove that roadblock, or I didn't make it easier for them to be more successful. And that's an opportunity for me to be reflective and go, okay, so now what are you going to do? So for me, I'm going to always root back into that core philosophy of what is my work each week and each day doing to help others be more successful in their work.
Yeah. One of the things I remember being at your headquarters is that when you were leading the charge for the Leadership Next program, your
Mhm.
CEO took time out of his busy day to communicate and share some of his experiences as it related to leadership and what to expect and what he expected, holding these leaders accountable for the mission of the organization. How impactful is it to have a CEO and other stakeholders who are highly involved with your mission?
Oh man, it makes the job so much easier when you know that they we're all in alignment on what we're trying to achieve. Jim has been carrying the torch for leadership development since he walked in the doors. Wow, in 2012, right? And I remember meeting with him in 2015 when I was looking to make a shift into what was being created at that time was our fledgling department of executive development. We had never really had a department around that specifically. And I remember meeting with him and saying, hey, what's your motivation behind creating this department? Um, you know, I'm looking for new opportunities, but I don't want to get caught up in just an initiative,
Right.
right? I mean, initiatives are important, but I don't want to get caught up in that. I want something that has staying power. And I mean, he looked me dead in the eyes. He's like, leadership is one of the most important aspects of our work, and it will never be an initiative. It will be a strategy that we focus on year in and year out. And that sold me in that moment, going, that's exciting when the CEO of the organization says this is like a core tenet to the work we do, and it will not waver. And you know what? He speaks his truth and he lives it. And I love that he's willing to step in at any leader level. I mean, he will speak to frontline supervisors. He understands the importance of leadership and leadership development, right? Both what our individual roles are in self development, but also what we should be collectively doing, both as a national organization, Boys and Girls Clubs of America, for our local clubs, but also holding our local executives' feet to the fire of you have a responsibility to be developing the future. And at every leader level, you have that responsibility because it can't just be what we're doing for youth if we're not doing it for our peers and others, right? So
Right.
it's made this work that much easier. It's made difficult conversations that much easier, right?
Mhm.
Because we're all in alignment. We may not agree on the how we get it done, but we agree on what needs to get done. And that makes those conversations way more beneficial and meaningful and less scary, right?
Right. Right. As you think about the new year, 2026, and even into the future, Greg, what leadership capabilities do you feel are most critical for the future success of the Boys and Girls Clubs?
Mm. So I would say two that come right off the top of my head: cultivating innovation. We're an organization that has roots over 160 years ago, right? Started in a small building in Hartford, Connecticut, right? Because of three or four women seeing a need in a community. And the only reason we exist today, um, at the scale in which we exist, right? Over 5,000 clubhouses across the nation and on military installations, is because we've been willing and able to innovate and meet the needs of not only the youth but the communities over those 160
Right.
years. So to me, that ability to be willing to innovate, it's and the challenge isn't so much about internally at a local organization innovation. The challenge is bringing others and the community and the key stakeholders in a community on board with innovation. Because as you know, anytime a company innovates, it's gonna require additional resources.
Right.
And in our world, that means we need to get more investment from the community into what we're trying to do. And oftentimes in that innovation, there's front loaded costs, right? Just like with any company, right? You have to put the capital up in order to do what you're trying to achieve. And so I would say cultivating innovation is key. Again, not just a mindset of what we do internally as a staff, but how we do that as a community. And then the second is managing ambiguity. I think if anything 2020 taught us, nothing is out of the realm of possibilities, right? I don't know if any of us in 2019, when we think about, when you do pre-mortems and you think about what could be the possible roadblocks or the problems, nobody would have thrown a pandemic in that, right? But it
Right.
really helped us understand we have to be nimble and we have to be able to navigate ambiguity in a way. And this is, again, outside of just the nonprofit space. I think any business and any successful organization, but definitely with Boys and Girls Clubs, you know, with so many ties into both, corporations, communities, governance, right? With government, local, state, federal. Every time there's a change of leadership in those spaces, it creates a natural space of ambiguity where we have to navigate as leaders and not get scared. We have to find our way. I think it's a military model called VUCA, right? VUCA, right? Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And to me, how are we thinking about those without it deviating from our core mission and what we're trying to achieve as an organization? So those are probably two that I would say stand out. If you're going to focus on those, innovation and how you manage ambiguity are critical to the success and where we're trying to go with our future ready strategy, which is a pretty bold plan for Boys and Girls Clubs of America.
What leadership qualities, Greg, do you think today's young people need to model most as they start to get into corporate America or take advantage of some of the wonderful nonprofits that are out there doing amazing work?
Yeah, so I would say, I'm gonna go with this idea of um, being willing to ask questions and not pose solutions. I mean, we all need to be solution oriented in
Right.
order to solve problems. I think at times, and it was happened to me in my young part of my career, I did a class or I went to this, training, and all of a sudden I felt like I was an expert. And this is how we need to do things. And new ideas are important.
Right.
The sooner you learn to ask questions, not to respond, but to truly understand, man, it will open your eyes as a young leader to the complexities, but also how you can start fitting in those ideas, right? And how you can connect. So if you have new ideas and you have things you want to share, start with questions. Start with the willingness to
Right.
ask, and then the willingness to recognize that yes, innovation needs to happen,
Right.
change does need to happen, and we shouldn't be changing for change's sake, right? Um, you know, in our current world, I believe with social media and everything coming at us in like these 30-second bites, we we see these new ideas and possibilities, but we're not willing to vet and dig in and understand the complexity behind that. We just think, oh, let's just change. But as I said earlier, I tried that and it failed miserably. Let's just change. I know what to do. And ultimately it requires pulling others in. And so again, my biggest thing, just be willing to ask a lot of questions. Again, not to respond, but to just understand. Then you'll get deeper into it.
I had a question I was going to ask you, but that was so brilliantly said that I don't even need to ask that question of you. So
Oh,
let me leave you with this one. How can people support and learn about the incredible work being done by the Boys and Girls Clubs?
yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost, find out where the one closest to you is
Mhm.
and go and make a call. Check out the website. I mean, Boys and Girls Clubs of America, bgca.org, allows you to put in a zip code and show you the closest club to your where you live. And at bare minimum, start there and just ask questions. Like I said, like call, schedule an appointment, stop by, schedule a time to visit, right? I mean, don't just walk in off the street. That, we want to create our safe spaces. So,
Right.
but be willing to explore and understand the needs of a community. And if you realize that there isn't one near you, start asking why. Like, why isn't there one? Should there be one? Now, I'm a big believer, and I have three boys, and they, when I was a CEO, two of them attended the club when they were old enough, and I've always said every young person deserves a Boys and Girls Clubs.
Right.
Right now, there's 55 million young people, school age youth in America. Our goal is to reach as many of them as we can, and we're in the millions, but we have a long way to go. And so it takes an individual, and I go back to how we started. 3, 4 women in Hartford, Connecticut saw a need, and they said, what can we do? And they ultimately opened a space for, at that time, young boys to come in and get a bowl of soup, maybe play a few games and read, to what we are today with over 5,000 clubhouses, millions of young people being served, every day. And again, on military installations, native lands, and across America in both urban and rural settings. So just look and see what you need and ask the question why, and then see how you can play a part in it, right? Even as a volunteer, I always tell people we have, and I don't have the exact number, but hundreds of thousands of volunteers in local clubs. That's where the impact happens. So if you want to feel that impact, find a time to volunteer. What are you passionate about? Go in. I guarantee you a Boys and Girls Club is doing something for young people that's aligned with a passion you have. So find your way.
Well said. I'll reflect back to that gentleman who had just gotten drafted by the NFL, knowing that he was going to be a multimillionaire and thanking his teammates, his mother, and the Boys and Girls Club is so powerful. The impact that you all are making, and many times impacting individuals who are never seen on national television, on a football or basketball field, or on the camera, because I know you all have many impressive, prestigious celebrities who support your organization, but it's those people in the streets who are impacting their communities that you all are responsible for putting in that position of great power to be able to influence in that way that we sometimes forget. So as someone who knows intimately the great work that you, Jim, every stakeholder, every frontline manager, senior leader, CEO of clubs across the world are doing day in and day out, I say thank you, as well as thank you for being on my podcast and sharing your journey and more about the organization that you're a part of.
I appreciate it, Octavius, and thank you again for having me.
So for my audience, I know you enjoyed this conversation. Get involved with your local club. And as Greg stated, if there's not one there, identify the reasons why and ask those questions. So thank you for listening or watching this podcast episode. Please hit like, share, so you can be alerted to future episodes, because we will try very hard to have great, compelling guests like Greg on in the future. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day and have an epic 2026. Greg, thank you again.
Thank you.